Hello, it's me, Darkfry, number 3 nicest guy. And it finally happened, folks. We got a new Metroid game! Metroid Dread, the sequel to Metroid Fusion that has been the subject of myriad rumors and fables for more than a decade, is an actual, real video game that now exists and is available for public consumption. Metroid fans all over the world screamed in unison at the announcement. Metroid Dread! I bought it with my money, held it in my hands, put it in my Nintendo Switch Entertainment System, played it to 100% completion twice, recorded the entirety of my first playthrough, wrote a script about it, which I am currently reading, and I am still in pure disbelief that it's real. And yet here we are. However, a whole 20 years have passed since its canonical predecessor, so we must ask one pressing question. How does Dread compare to Fusion? And does it meet the lofty standards of the Metroid name? Keep in mind that there will be spoilers ahead for both Dread and Fusion, so unless you don't want to be spoiled, join me as we find out the answer to those questions. That's right, baby, this is another sequelitis, a sequel to the sequelitis. Here we go! Did you know? The original Metroid was heavily inspired and influenced by the 1979 sci-fi horror classic Alien. I mean, I hope you knew that. If not, you really need to brush up on your gaming trivia. It's common knowledge at this point. It's likely the reason Samus is a woman, too, since she was in part based on Ellen Ripley. That was a big deal back in the day. It was one of gaming's first big secrets and reveals. And if you don't believe me, then check out this comic from a Japanese strategy guide which accidentally portrays Samus as a lesbian icon. Also, if you take Ripley's name and rotate the P 180 degrees, you get Ridley! And that's where he got his name from. That's definitely it. But feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Wink, 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 wink. I'm trying to wink. Why is winking so hard? Anyway, given its inspiration, horror has been an integral part of Metroid since its inception. Even with its piddly little 8-bit graphics, the original Metroid managed to convey an atmosphere of fear, danger, and uncertainty that every entry since then has tried building up on, giving us areas like the abandoned ship in Super Metroid. Metroid Fusion, though, cranks the horror dial to 11. A Metroid game that takes place in an abandoned space station where you're stalked by a super strong and scary alien seems like a natural step for the series to take. If you take inspiration from Alien, then why not say fuck it and just make an Alien game? It's a no-brainer idea, and they nailed it. Metroid Fusion is a horror game. Keep this in mind because it will be important at various points throughout this video. Metroid Fusion is a horror game and I will be analyzing it as such. Let's immediately bite into the juicy meat of gameplay, and after we're done, we'll examine the world and design bone it was on. I'm good at analogies. Metroid Fusion's gameplay is incredibly simple yet effective. Controlling Samus feels smooth, responsive, and above all, easy. Fusion has a straightforward control scheme all the way through, and it works to its advantage. Out of all Metroid games, Fusion has the fewest power-ups and abilities for Samus to obtain and use. It enforces that Samus isn't the hunter, but the prey. The player is meant to feel like they are always at a disadvantage. The gameplay is the bedrock of establishing the feeling of helplessness that is essential for effective horror, and Metroid Fusion builds on that bedrock constantly with environmental storytelling and brilliant sound design. Metroid Fusion manages to be genuinely unnerving and scary at points, despite being a GBA game. Environmental hints like changes in your surroundings give subtle but palpable tension and build-up, and consistently strong sound design with the SAX's cold, hollow footsteps or the groans of nightmare create a persistent feeling of fear and mystery that lasts from beginning to end. Metroid Fusion's map and progression is shockingly linear, even when compared to previous games in the series, and this is no accident. It's designed this way to elevate its horror atmosphere. Because of its linearity, Fusion can effectively set up and build up to its horror encounters just by giving you objectives to bounce you around the different sectors. It uses Adam, the computer that talks to you throughout the game, to do this, and it's something Fusion is often criticized for, but I actually kind of like Adam's role in setting up the tension. Being bossed around by an uncaring and emotionless machine definitely adds to the creepiness. The way the game railroads you makes all of its threats and horrors feel even more inescapable. Basically, I want to make it clear that Metroid Fusion's linearity is not a bug, but a feature. It is a tool that Metroid Fusion uses to create the atmospheric, subtle horror it's known for, making it a truly unique and beautiful experience. There are not many games out there that do what Fusion does so expertly. Now that we understand what makes Fusion so good, we can finally talk about Metroid Dread, and how it is in almost every way Fusion's complete antithesis. I gotta confess something. I've been planning on making this video ever since Dread was announced, and for good reason too. I've already made a sequelitis style video analyzing the transition to 3D the Metroid franchise made with Prime, so a similar video analyzing the long-anticipated continuation of the Metroid canon that came out 20 years after its predecessor just makes sense. What I wasn't expecting was for Dread to literally be the yin to Fusion's yang. Metroid Dread is an action game. It's immediately noticeable the moment you control Samus. Doing so has never felt better. It's smooth as butter, and from the very beginning she has a slide and parry available to her that expand her movement and combat abilities considerably. Dread also has, by far, the biggest number of abilities and power-ups in the series. In fact, this game decks you out so much that it actually becomes a bit of a problem by the end. The controls become a bit overpopulated and cumbersome. Similar button presses do wildly different things, and it takes a lot of getting used to, and the lack of control remapping is abysmal. Once I did get used to it though, I felt absolutely unstoppable. This is definitely Samus at her most powerful, and overall, controlling her is an absolute joy. The difference between Fusion and Dread's gameplay is most obvious during boss fights. Let me be a bit blunt here. Fusion's boss fights are terrible. This is an area where the simple control scheme and relatively limited options Metroid Fusion gives you works to its detriment. It's one thing to feel weaker and helpless when you're not supposed to be able to fight back, and it's another to be forced to fight back against a boss that can only be killed in one extremely obtuse way that sometimes doesn't even work. This stupid robot that you can only damage from a specific point above it whenever it feels like it, this dumbass spider that just grabs you and murders you, and the appropriately named Nightmare that flies around super fast and unavoidably while covering half the screen. Seriously, what is this? Who is responsible for this? I just want to talk. Boss fights in 2D Metroid games are hit or miss in general, but Fusions are something else. I understand what they were going for, but what they were going for sucks! It doesn't work because the feelings this boss fights invoke in me aren't tension or fear, but pure frustration and aggravation. A lot of these bosses actively made me salty when fighting them, and that's never good. The goals of Metroid Fusion's design and gameplay doesn't translate well to combat encounters. On the contrary, Dread has the perfect gameplay system going to make some absolute banger bosses, and it does not disappoint. The combat encounters are by far the biggest area of improvement from Fusion. You actually have flexible movement options that you can use to dodge and attack. The boss fights also add a cinematic flair when you parry them correctly that is absurdly satisfying. These cinematic action scenes not only look cool as fuck due to the game's stunning visuals, but they also allow Samus to absolutely decimate these hulking beasts with a barrage of missiles. They are also made even more rewarding by the fact that Metroid Dread is surprisingly difficult. This game kicked my ass, but like in a good way. The challenge felt fair. The bosses aren't hard because they can only be damaged if you shoot them with a specific missile from a specific spot on a tiny hitbox that only works when it wants to. They're hard because they have fun, interesting, and varied attacks that need to be maneuvered around. Dread also has, in my opinion, the best portrayal of Samus in the series. This was one of the things I was worried about before playing the game, which sounds weird when you think about it. How Metroid portrays Samus was kind of taken for granted. At least until the Other M incident.
Why am I still alive?
I have to admit I have a bit of a soft spot for Other M, but its portrayal of Samus is disliked for a reason. It has a number of issues, from relying too much on monologuing to a sort of sexist power dynamic, or her being paralyzed with fear when facing Ridley in a way that's clumsy and out of character. I think Metroid Dread succeeds where Other M failed. They nailed Samus in this game. Okay, that was bad phrasing. Metroid Dread does an excellent job of showing Samus both being an absolute badass that kicks butt and doesn't afraid of anything, and being in desperate, helpless situations fighting for her life. And they do this through nothing more than body language and her eyes. We all know that the eyes are the most expressive part of the human body, and Dread takes ample advantage of that fact. From the opening cutscene of the game when she exits the elevator and she's attacked by this super strong Chozo guy, she remains steadfast and immediately fights back, only to be restrained and left at his mercy. And here you can really see the fear and weakness in her eyes, and it's effective. She fought back as best she could, even cracking his mask, but her opponent was just too strong, and now she's in his grasp. This is where the fear and desperation should set in. This is how you make it impactful and real. This sets the tone of the game very well. Like I said earlier, by the end of Dread, you will control Samus at her most powerful, and that is significant because the game is about building that power up. To get to that point, she has to face multiple foes that she cannot defeat. To be the hunter, she must first be the prey. And it's those moments early in the game where we see Samus being helpless and desperate that make the moments when she has the power to fight back later even more satisfying. During the final battle with Big Bad Chozo Man, the same scene we saw at the beginning plays out, but now it's completely different and it is one of the rawest things ever. I love it. This is character progression, while Other M did character backtracking. Plus, the excellent animation and body language on Samus leads to some incredible scenes of pure coolness. My favorite is this moment right here where she's dropped into a huge dark room full of lava, and she's all cautious and surveying the area for whatever monster is lurking in the shadows. Only for her to realize that, oh, it's just Kraid, lol. Then she relaxes and nonchalantly fires a charge shot at him. In summary, this Kotaku article is wrong. Not like causing an outrage wrong, though. Okay, you know what? Fuck it. Tangent time! When Dread came out, there were a lot of articles that made the gamers angry for some reason. Y'all gotta chill. An article like this isn't something to get mad about, even if you disagree. The highlight for me, though, was this article about emulating Dread, which also seems quite silly to me. People are greatly overestimating Kotaku's power, methinks. Don't worry, everyone, a Kotaku article is not gonna stop Dread from selling well. I think we're gonna be okay. Nintendo has been advertising it like crazy. It was actually a bit surreal to see Nintendo put so much effort into marketing a Metroid game. Heck, they even got Brie Larson to do ads for it. Brie Larson! You might know her from Scott Pilgrim.
Bruh.
That was a really good move, to be fair. Brie is a Metroid fan and has expressed multiple times that she desperately wants to play Samus in a hypothetical Metroid movie. And I think that's super dope. Unfortunately, Brie, you cannot play Samus in the hypothetical Metroid movie because you are not 6 foot 3 inches tall. It is of critical importance that Samus is at least 6 foot 3 in the hypothetical Metroid movie. So unless they can use some movie magic to make you taller, Brie, I'm sorry. Also, Samus will speak exactly twice, because that's what she does in Metroid Dread, and both of them had me squealing with excitement. Also, Kraid will be played by Danny DeVito. Nintendo, hire me to make the hypothetical Metroid movie. My email is on my Twitter bio, and my DMs are open. Call me. Seriously, Nintendo, do it. Then Brie can do ads where she watches the hypothetical Metroid movie. I could also get her to say that
if you're enjoying this video and want to support the channel,
the best way to do that is by pledging to my Patreon like these wonderful people do, with special shoutouts to Philip Church, Seth Zerd, and Empsty Nima. Please support the channel so I can afford to cast Brie Larson for the hypothetical Metroid movie. Tangent over! Whew. Hey, speaking of ads, isn't it kind of weird that Metroid Dread was advertised as a horror game? Most of the marketing around Dread revolved around the Emmy, the spooky, scary stalker that haunts the game. The Emmy absolutely dominated the marketing of Dread, and for good reason. They're the new gimmick. They're on the box art, the back of the box, everywhere. You get the idea that they want to sell that the Emmy are scary, and that you're supposed to think of them as a horror monster. Like, the back of the box literally says,
Samus is alone on the unknown planet ZDR. She must use the abilities at her disposal to explore. Fear lurks around every corner. How will she cope with the dread of isolation? Can she survive long enough to uncover the truth?
Let's go, partner! Okay!
I really like the Emmy as a concept. Their sound and visual design is great. These emotionless machines make for great predators. The way they crawl and contort their bodies to chase you is what really sells them to me. And the noise they make is almost cute, which somehow makes them even creepier. Also, they stab your face when they catch you, and personally, I don't like being stabbed in the face. I find it undesirable and spooky. Unfortunately, while their design and concept is great, I'm not a fan of their execution in-game, and to see why, we have to compare them to the SAX. Because of Metroid Fusion's linearity, it has a much easier time building up and creating effective horror encounters. The genius of the SAX is that it's literally just a more powerful version of you for the entire game. We all know that Samus is an absolute badass, right? It's difficult to be afraid of something when you're in control of a complete powerhouse like Samus. But this goes both ways. Imagine how terrifying something must be if someone as awesome as Samus is scared of it. It's the same tactic Dread uses. The space station Fusion takes place in is dense and claustrophobic, and really sells the possibility that the SAX could be lurking anywhere and could appear at any moment. It's a looming and persistent threat throughout the entire game that never lets you put your guard down, and that's the key. Dread's world is much bigger and more open than Fusion, so it has to take a different approach. The Emmy only appear in specific areas called Emmy zones, and you go in and out of these zones constantly throughout the game. And when you enter them, you can always expect to encounter an Emmy. The reason this is a problem is because a crucial element of what makes horror games work is absent here. Obfuscation. I've always wanted to use that word. It's a great word. It has a B before an F. Who does that? Basically, it means concealing critical information from you. The truth is that at surface level, the Emmy and the SAX work in the exact same way. The SAX encounters are also scripted, and there's only 3 of them in the entire game. The SAX will not appear randomly outside those 3 appearances. The difference is that Fusion doesn't tell you this. As far as the player knows, the SAX could appear at any time. Like the back of the box says, it could be lurking at any corner. Especially after the game drops the bombshell that there's actually more than one SAX on the station. The possibility of the SAX showing up at any given moment is more important than its actual appearances. Another important thing the SAX has going for it is the aforementioned 3 encounters. A monster showing up too much actually makes it less scary. Its spook factor just wears off as the player becomes used to it. Its absence is always more important than its presence. The Emmy zones take a huge chunk of the map and a significant portion of the game's playtime. After a while, they stop becoming this scary behemoth threat and just start becoming a nuisance. Mechanically, though, the SAX and Emmy are very different. The SAX is simply programmed. If you want, you can bait it into running left and right forever like a dummy. But it works because the SAX sections are all just tunnels that funnel you from point A to point B, so that simple behavior is all it needs. By contrast, the Emmy use much more sophisticated AI. They are reactive foes and behave a lot more dynamically. But the zones they are in are massive, so they can be avoided just through sheer spacing. To deal with this issue, Emmy in later areas are either really fast or have some sort of ability that halts your movement. This is the game's attempt at getting the player to use the stealth mechanics in the Emmy zones. The problem is that stealth in Metroid Dread sucks. The stealth gameplay of Dread just isn't very fun. It basically amounts to press the cloak button and pray to Danny DeVito that the robot doesn't see you. It's inconsistent as heck and only works when it wants to. Most of the time, the Emmy will just continue walking and will just bump into you anyway. The stealth mechanics of Dread feel like an afterthought, like they felt the game needed more so they just slapped some stealth into it. At some point, I started not even bothering to be stealthy around the Emmy. In this game, where moving around fast and jumping feels so fluid and satisfying, putting in stealth mechanics feels like an odd decision to me, and the game would probably be better off without it. In fact, I know it would! At one point in the story, the Emmy get deactivated, becoming a non-issue, and it's by far the best part of the game. Ironically, it's also the part of the game that has its most effective horror moments. Dread might be an action game, but it still nails the atmosphere and ambiance the series is known and loved for. The best part is when you accidentally free the X-parasites from the place they're quarantined in. Elon. Wait. The X-parasites from space are being kept in a place called Elon? Was that on purpose? Anyway, Elon is one of the places where Dread really earns its title. It's the point in the story where the entire game completely shifts. Immediately after escaping from their prison, the X-Parasites infect the entire planet. And we all know how scary a virus infecting a whole planet in a shockingly short time span is, right? The X-Parasites also possess the Chozo responsible for deactivating the Emmy, and brings them back like the little scoundrels they are.
A dubious little creature getting up to mischief. This is no good.
Point is, Dread doesn't really need the Emmy to induce, well, dread. I don't think they should have been removed from the game, though. They do have a place and purpose in this story that I appreciate. The Emmy are a very potent way of showing how powerful Samus becomes by the end of the game. The first few Emmy are enormous, insurmountable threats, while the final Emmy gets completely owned by Samus in an instant. It's incredibly satisfying, to say the least. What I wish was different about the Emmy is the way they work in-game. I wish it leaned on its action-packed gameplay and smooth movement controls more. Imagine if instead of slow, frustrating stealth segments, the Emmy sections were high-octane, high-stakes chase sequences. You're exploring an area, minding your own business, and all of a sudden, the wall behind you explodes, and an Emmy starts mercilessly chasing you. The scariest and most interesting thing about the Emmy anyway is the way they move and chase you in pursuit mode. Their location and appearances might be static, but their movement patterns and behavior are dynamic and unpredictable. I think they should always be in pursuit mode, and not appear in specific Emmy zones, but in specific portions of the map designed for chase sequences. That sort of gameplay would feel right at home in a game with Dread's themes and gameplay. Basically, what I'm saying is, seriously, Nintendo, hire me to make every Metroid game, my email is on my Twitter bio, and my DMs are open! This is what I mean when I said that Dread is the antithesis of Fusion. Fusion is a horror game that is at its weakest when it's trying to be an action game, while Dread is an action game that is at its weakest when it's trying to be a stealth-focused survival horror game. However, there's still one more important question we need to ask. Is Metroid Dread a good Metroid game? And what does that even mean? So far, I've been analyzing and comparing Metroid Dread and Fusion in a vacuum. However, this analysis would be incomplete if I don't address the elephant that has been in this room for quite a while now. Seriously, she's just off screen. This elephant came out in 1994 and is called Super Metroid. Super Metroid is the darling of the series. It essentially defined what makes Metroid Metroid. It is still considered one of the best games ever made, and is the standard every entry in the series is expected to meet. Out of all the 2D games, Dread seems to be the one that is most similar to Super. Unfortunately, any Metroid game that isn't Super will be divisive, so let's look at them both for a bit and find out why that might be. Super Metroid's main appeal is how it treats exploration. The beginning part of the game is actually quite linear. Super Metroid guides you with the invisible hand of level design through Zebes. In your first tour of the areas, the player will constantly find obstacles that impede their progress and force them to take a particular path. The most obvious example of this is in Lower Brinstar, where you have to fall down this big shaft, and once you do, you can't climb back up. This linearity continues while you are stuck in the area below this shaft and enter Norfair. You get the high jump boots, fight Danny DeVito,
Anyway,
Get the Varia suit, the speed boost, the ice beam, all while your exploration options are still completely limited. After you get the ice beam, you can climb up the shaft again and continue going up from the point you fell. And once you do that, you will find yourself back at your ship, the starting point of the game. The player has at this point gone full circle, but with a lot more tools under their belt, and it is at this point where Super Metroid completely unfolds and the player's options increase exponentially. After this point, Super Metroid says, "Aight, you're on your own now," and leaves you to explore to your heart's content. Super Metroid is an excellent showcase of what I like to call the linearity paradox. Game designers usually love linearity because it makes it way easier for them to control the player's movement and progression, thus allowing them to handcraft a unique and engaging experience. However, players usually don't like it when they are obviously railroaded. So the challenge is to make a sort of pseudo-linearity, an experience that doesn't feel linear, even when it is at certain points. The beginning of Super Metroid is linear, but it doesn't feel like it. Metroid Fusion lifts the curtains and proudly displays its linearity. Meanwhile, Metroid Dread is big and open like Super Metroid, but it feels linear. Probably the most common criticism against Dread is that it quote-unquote holds your hand too much. The level design techniques Super Metroid pioneered to guide the player through the world have been turned to 11 in Dread. Every 10 steps there will be a point of no return, or something that subtly points you in the right direction. When you get a new power-up, the place you need to use it to progress the story is always the one that is closest, and even when your objective is in another part of the map, there will likely be an elevator nearby that can whisk you there in an instant. Metroid Dread is a big open game that you can explore as much as you want, but you never actually have to look for the critical path. It's always right in front of you. Now, is this a flaw of Dread? Does it make the game worse? Who's to say? Personally, I'm the type of player who likes to explore and exhaust every option before progressing, so after I realized that after getting a new power-up, the critical path was the one closest to me, I started purposefully ignoring them and exploring the rest of the map instead. Metroid Dread does give you the option and freedom to explore. You can sequence break it just like Super, and doing so is just as satisfying. Plus, the way the critical path unfolds before you like a red carpet as you get stronger is kind of satisfying. Not getting lost as much makes Dread feel like a much more smooth and fast-paced experience, and that's because it's designed to be an action game. The people who say that Dread holds your hand too much say that because they are comparing it to Super Metroid, but Super Metroid also holds your hand, it just does it a bit differently than usual. You see, Super Metroid is a bit of a tsundere.
Oh no!
Let me explain what I mean. A tsundere is a type of character usually found in anime that has a harsh, stern, or hostile exterior while harboring a warmer, friendlier side deep inside them. How does this apply to Super Metroid? Take this room, for example. Here, you're supposed to hold the run button to sprint over the disappearing blocks. When you run, there's no real indication that you're doing anything special aside from going a bit faster, and it's a bit finicky even if you do it right. The answer here isn't super clear, and any player can easily make the wrong assumption that they need some sort of ability that they don't have yet. Most games at this point would just have a window pop up that says press Y to run. But Super Metroid is not most games. What it does instead is lock the door behind you. It leaves you in there to figure it out yourself. and it may not feel like it, but this is a form of hand-holding. If it didn't lock that door, you might think that you can't progress here yet, and you would backtrack to fruitlessly explore the tiny map you have available to you, and probably get stuck and frustrated as a result. Super Metroid doesn't let you make that mistake, but it doesn't feel like the game is actually helping you out. Super Metroid is full of moments like these. It will hold your hand, but not because it likes you or anything, baka! See, this is the beauty of writing. I didn't have to turn Super Metroid into a tsundere elephant anime girl to make this point, but I wanted to, so I did. And it's my script, so nobody can stop me. I am drunk with power! So, if Super is the game that defined Metroid, what does that tell us about what Metroid is? Well, not much, actually, because 8 years after Super, Metroid Fusion arrived on the scene. And Fusion is the game that made this question complicated. Metroid Fusion is a fascinating video game because it is simultaneously the logical continuation of the franchise after Super thematically, and the complete opposite of Super Metroid as a game. If you use Super Metroid to define what Metroid is or should be, then Metroid Fusion, despite being an excellent game overall and a great 2D horror game, is a pretty bad Metroid game. If you come into Metroid Fusion expecting another Super Metroid, you will be disappointed. Metroid Fusion boldly challenges the formula Super Metroid created and perfected. The world is linear and claustrophobic. It deliberately restrains the player's freedoms and discourages exploration. It is the polar opposite of what Metroid is currently known for, and it is often criticized for exactly these things, but again, they're not bugs, they're features. Oh hey, here's a boss fight. By the way, he's immune to the thing you just got. This game has the features and design that work best for its goals. When evaluating Metroid games critically, the first thing to understand is that not every game in the series will be similar to Super, and that we have to analyze them based on their individual merits and goals. You might have noticed a pattern throughout this video so far. I've been focusing on genres a lot. But not once have I described either Fusion or Dread as Metroidvanias. That's not because I think they aren't, that's not a debate I'm interested in covering this video, but because as a genre, it's not very useful. Right about here in the script, I had this whole section where I talked about genre and how we talk about it, how we use it in games discourse, and how useful it is, or whatever. But I cut it out because it was driving me insane, and I didn't know how to do it without straight up plagiarizing that Innuendo Studios Who Shot Guybrush Threepwood video, so I'm sorry. For now, let's just say that Metroidvania is less of a genre and more a descriptor for world layout and navigation. These games are so radically different in their goals and design that categorizing them both under the vague descriptor of Metroidvania is asinine. Not only that, I think it does the games a huge disservice. And to see why, I'm going to talk about Paper Mario. Again, this is my script, I have the power here, you cannot stop! Paper Mario is infamous for making one of the biggest heel turns out of any game series. Fans who will speak so fondly about the first 2, maybe 3 games of the series will talk about the games beyond those with nothing but hate and vitriol. I am included in this. Some of my earliest videos were dedicated to praising all the games up to Super Paper Mario and bashing Sticker Star and Color Splash. I do agree with a lot of my criticisms, and I'm still not a fan of those games. Did you perchance answer, remove the story entirely? Because that's what they did! The plot of Sticker Star is practically non-existent. Go off, King. Tell those games what's what. To give you an idea of what a salty fanboy I was, my video on Super Paper Mario was titled The Last Good Paper Mario Game, and I uploaded it the day Origami King came out. That's how confident I was that that game would suck. Those videos are not my best work, though. They have one fatal flaw. For as much as I waffle on and on about how these later entries fail as Paper Mario games, I don't actually define what makes a Paper Mario game in the first place. What do these games have that makes them great Paper Mario games that these games don't, thus making them bad Paper Mario games? What can Paper Mario be boiled down to? I never identified what that is, and the problem with those videos isn't merely an oversight on my part either, because I don't think I could do that even if I tried. How can you point to a specific aspect of these games and go, that's what defines Paper Mario? What would that even be? Is it the partner system? Is it the turn-based combat? Is it the aesthetic? Could Paper Mario be a series defined purely by its paper aesthetic? Who's to say? It's an abstract concept that's not easy to pin down. And in those videos, I treated it as if it's a definite, concrete thing that can be pointed at and defined as the soul of Paper Mario. There is a term for what I just described, and I'm gonna teach it to you. That's right, motherfuckers, you're gonna learn, and you're gonna like it! Reification is the logical fallacy of treating an abstraction or idea as a concrete and definite entity. The reason I mention reification isn't just because it's an interesting logical fallacy, but because it is incredibly common in video game discourse. I did it in my Paper Mario videos, and I probably did it in this video too. I ain't checking though. When discussing why we like the games we like, we tend to fall into this logical fallacy because no idea or game design decision is good or bad by itself. It's when put in the context of the game it's in that it takes form. Paper Mario isn't so beloved purely because of partners or the combat or whatever. It's not as simple as that. Paper Mario is beloved because of a number of factors that combined make it so that there isn't another game series quite like it. And after an extended absence that had people starving for more Paper Mario, when Sticker Star came out, the fanbase collectively decided that this wasn't it. This wasn't Paper Mario. I do wonder if we haven't been fair to these games, though. I think our desire for another Paper Mario game, whatever that may be, clouded our vision so we can't appreciate these games for what they are. Friendly neighborhood thumbnail wizard Hot Cider once told me something that would change my perspective a bit. He told me that Paper Mario Color Splash is an amazing point-and-click adventure game. And you know what? I can totally see that. With them leaning more on their hard paper aesthetic, the newer Paper Marios are designed more like environmental puzzle adventure games. And if you look at them like that, their strengths begin to shine more and become more obvious. Color Splash has several flaws that make it a bad Paper Mario game in the eyes of the fans, but if you look at it for what it's actually trying to do, they might even turn into positives. The way these games are viewed by the fans has been irrevocably tainted by the expectations and standards that come with the Paper Mario title. They are more than just Paper Mario games. Each one has strengths and little quirks that make them excel at something. Color Splash has clever writing and amazing environmental puzzles that make it a great adventure game. Origami King continued that and added a stunning world on top. Sticker Star... Okay, not this one. Sticker Star still sucks. These games have things to love about them, but they get lost purely because of our closed-mindedness. Not just that, I feel that trying to adhere to the fans' idea of what Paper Mario should be is what is holding these games back. For example, Color Splash would be a much better game if it didn't have combat at all. This game did not need combat, and it feels like it only has it because the past Paper Marios had turn-based combat, so this one needed it too. I feel like this exact thing is happening to the Metroid series too. Categorizing them all under the vague umbrella of Metroidvania causes the things that make each of them excel at their own niche get lost in the noise, while people focus on what Metroid was so far instead of what it can be. The legacy of the Metroid series and the huge expectations the fans had is probably something that the developers at Mercury Steam were keenly aware of when developing it, and this is what is holding Metroid Dread back. To me, it feels like the reason that Metroid Dread focuses so much on horror and the Emmy as stalkers is because it was just continuing what Fusion started 20 years ago. It's the continuation of Fusion, after all. It's the sequel to the outlier of the series. But don't worry, there will be more of that Super Metroid world and map design fans know and love. It's trying to combine the two, but Fusion and Super don't really mix. It's trying to have it both ways, but it doesn't go far enough to make changes to the Metroid formula to make this combination work. Fusion dared to change its entire structure and throw away everything its predecessor was known for in order to serve its needs and properly convey its horror to the player. Dread doesn't do that, and that is its biggest flaw. I really wish that Dread just stuck to its guns and just said, I am a badass action game, and really leaned into its strengths as an action game. By trying to have the cake and eat it too, Metroid Dread instead feels like two incomplete video games duct-taped together. Thankfully, one of these incomplete video games is a really good 2D action game. The moment Dread had the word Metroid in its title, it was expected to be a certain way, adhere to a certain formula, fill a certain mold. And that's a shame, because the legacy of Metroid, what does Metroid mean, doesn't really matter. It's such a fickle thing that's hard to pin down and relies on personal experience so much that the better question to ask would be, what does Metroid mean to you? At the end of the day, Metroid is simply Metroid, and it has so much to offer and many reasons to enjoy it. Do you play Metroid for the gameplay, the action, and controlling a badass bounty hunter that kicks alien butt? If so, Dread is gonna be your jam. Do you play them for the atmosphere, the tension? Fusion is for you then. Do you enjoy being lost and navigating a large unknown planet? Then Super is up your alley. Do you play them once, multiple times? Do you sequence break, speedrun? There is so much to enjoy about this series, and it's all Metroid, no matter how you look at it. To me, this is one of the big problems with games discourse. I think that games should be allowed to be evaluated based on their own merits instead of the expectation the series has tied to it. Metroid especially is a series that undergoes constant evolution and change, and this is something I've ultimately learned to be grateful for, because while some of their attempts did fail spectacularly, this willingness to change is what led to the Metroid Prime trilogy, which are some of my favorite games ever made. Also, Metroid Other M would be the best game ever made if the developers just said, fuck it, we're making Metroid May Cry. Games should be allowed to change. Metroid should be allowed to change. Paper Mario should be allowed to change and have their new games be given a fair chance. The reason I brought up Paper Mario in the first place is to show that I am also guilty of this. I get it. I understand the frustration of just wanting more of Super Metroid or more of Thousand Year Door, but that desire shouldn't make us close-minded. I have to admit that I am absolutely guilty of being way too starved and excited for more Metroid. No matter how many Metroidvanias I play, none of them truly scratch the itch that Metroid does for me. When Dread was revealed, I was so excited. I've shown this clip at the start of this video, and that's because this was basically how I reacted to the trailer too. I was starved for more Metroid. I needed it, injected in my veins.
What do you think is coursing through my veins right now?
Metroid?
So after all that time, I got to finally play it, and god damn, it is one of the best 2D action games I played. So to finally answer the damn question, is Metroid Dread a good Metroid game? Who cares?